Looking to level up your poker game but don't know where to start? You're not alone. We're here to share 10 pre-flop poker tips that will turn your game around in no time. Stay with us because this video is made just for you. Let's get right into it. Tip 10. Understand your table position. Nobody is going to tell you this, but the most important thing to remember with your pre-flop poker strategy is that your position at the poker tables is literally everything. It's not as simple as you think it is. Not all the seats created are equal. Your chances of winning vary significantly, depending on your position. The most profitable spots are typically the cutoff and the button, the latter being right in front of the dealer. Why do these positions give you a huge advantage in the game? 1. You can dictate the price of the pot. It's easier to take the lead. By being the last player to act, you get a final say at the price of the pot. If you have a strong value hand, you may bet if your opponent checks to you, or even raise if your opponent bets first. Also, if you have a mediocre or a drawing hand, you can exercise pot control by checking back or flat calling your opponent's bet. 2. You have an informational advantage. Poker is a game of incomplete information, and the player with the informational advantage will come out on top more often than not. That simply means if you are the last player to act in a betting round flop, turn, river, you get to see what your opponents did, while they have no idea what you're going to do. 3. You can bluff more effectively. Due to the informational disadvantage, your opponents won't be as willing to fight back against you. This means you can often push them out of the pot with a well-timed bluff. However, you must be careful when trying to bluff recreational players because they usually have a hard time folding and tend to overcall. Have you noticed how your position affects your game outcomes? Share your experiences in the comments below. Now that you know how crucial your position is, let's discover how to make a strong entry into the game with your raises. Ready to take the lead? Let's dive in. Tip 9. Enter the pot with a raise. If you feel a hand is not worth an open raise, then it probably shouldn't be played at all. It's really that simple. And this is because in poker, it makes a huge difference when you take the betting lead in a hand. Can't stress it enough. You got to make a statement move no matter how much it overwhelms you and enter the game in style. When you're the first one to put chips into the pot, make it count with an open raise. If you ask us, we'd say raise it to 3 times the size of the big blind. A default strategy in all poker games, because why would you want to settle for just matching the big blind when you can actually triple it? For example, if you're holding ace-king in a standard $1-2 game, you might start by raising to $6, which is 3 times the big blind. This gives you a good position, though you might adjust this based on how the game feels. This move isn't just for the show. It sets you up for a more profitable game. Entering the pot with a raise is statistically proven to be better than open limping. In case you don't know what open limping is, it means paying the big blind instead of open raising and is usually a sign of recreational poker players. Here's why we're emphasizing open raising over limping in. 1. You will play the hand with the initiative. The player who open raises is perceived to have a stronger hand than the player who calls or limps pre-flop. You're basically telling the table you mean business with a strong hand. This puts you in the driver's seat right after the flop, allowing you to keep up the pressure with a continuation bet or a C-bet. C-bets are usually profitable, and you should be inclined to make a C-bet on most flops unless there's a good reason not to. Now, if you choose to open limp instead, you have no initiative, so you lose the opportunity to make a C-bet on the flop. This means that you automatically put yourself at a disadvantage early in the game through the rest of the hand. 2. You can scoop the pot early. A second possibility is when you open raise, you may win the pot right away. Very often you might win an uncontested pot by just being more aggressive than your opponents. You can either take it down pre-flop by forcing everyone to fold, or with a simple continuation bet after the flop. And honestly, at the micros, most players simply aren't capable of adjusting properly. Otherwise, they would be playing at higher limits. So it simply makes sense to just raise every single time you open the pot. 3. You are building up the pot with your strong hands. If you want to win big in poker, you need to win big pots. Get it? Now the best way to go about it is to try and build up the pot yourself. preferably as early on in the hand as possible. The bigger the pot preflop, the easier it is to ship the rest of your money later in the middle of the hand. This has to do with pot geometry. Seemingly small adjustments in your initial open raise size can lead to dramatically bigger pots on future streets. Up next, we'll tackle how to turn limpers to your advantage. Get ready to boost your earnings. Tip 8. Raise over limpers. If you get a strong hand right from the start, try to build the pot early. Mark our words, that's your best move. Never follow the lead of players who limp, just call the big blind before you. Rather, treat their limps as opportunities to take control by raising. If you see others just paying the big blind and not raising, what we call limping, you might consider limping behind them, especially in a relaxed game with casual players. Now, what do we mean by limping behind? It's when you also just pay the big blind after others have done it. Play it smart by increasing your raise size by one big blind per limper to discourage them from calling. For example, in a $1, $2 game, if a player limps in before you, bump your raise to $8 instead of $6. This is one of the most successful strategies out there. Have you tried it out? Let us know in the comments below. Curious about how to use your strong hands to your fullest potential? Buckle up as we uncover the power of aggression. Tip 7. Be aggressive with your strong hands. Don't ever slow play. This is a common mistake many micro-stakes players make over and over again at the tables. Always looking to induce action from their opponents by playing a strong hand too passively. Having a strong hand is something that doesn't happen very often, so when it does, you need to take advantage of it by putting as much money as possible in the middle to extract as much value as you can. Now, in case your opponent also has a strong hand, you may extract the maximum value by making the pot as big as possible. At the same time, if he doesn't have anything and he folds, then we can forget about the hand and simply move on to the next one. Always remember, you aren't scaring them out of the pot. If they don't have anything, then there is nothing you can do. But when you fail to bet with your strong hands, you are simply lighting money on fire at the micro stakes. What's your approach with strong hands? Do you tend to play aggressively or use a more subtle strategy? Let us know in the comments. Aggression is key, but knowing when to call with trickier hands can make or break your game. Don't get it? Stay with us to find out what we mean. Tip 6. When to call with speculative hands. Okay, so being aggressive before the flop usually nets more wins than just calling. Most of the time, you want to be raising or re-raising before the flop, but that doesn't mean you should never call. Sometimes, raising or re-raising isn't the only best move. Another common mistake new players make is to call before and after the flop too often, especially with weaker hands that don't stand up well against others. So, when you're deciding what to do before the flop, think of calling it your plan B. Okay, so you must be recalling that old poker saying, if it's worth calling, it's often worth raising. But take that with a pinch of salt, please. There will definitely be times when calling is your smartest move, especially with what we call speculative hands. Now, what are speculative hands? They're hands that aren't strong by themselves, but have the potential to become something much better after the flop, small pairs or suited connectors like 4 clubs, 4 diamonds, or 7, 6 suited. For instance, with a small pair, you might try set mining. That means you call, hoping to catch a third card of the same rank after the flop, which could help you win a big pot. Suited connectors like jack, 10s, or 8, 7s also have a knack for turning into straights or flushes. When you play these hands, you need good implied odds, the amount you might win later if you make your hand. You should also think about pot odds, whether the current pot justifies your call. Implied odds are a bit of a guess, but they're super important. They depend on things like how much money is at stake, what kind of players you're up against, and how well your hand strength is hidden. Speaking of hidden, straight draws are often less obvious than flushes. For example, when a third heart hits the board, even beginners might guess someone could have a flush. Let's explain this with a couple of scenarios. Imagine you have jack, 10 hearts, and the flop comes. Board 1, queen hearts, 2 clubs, 9 diamonds. Board 2, king hearts, 3 clubs, 6 hearts. On the first board, a straight is less obvious and might win you a bigger pot. On the second, A flush might be easier for others to spot, and there might even be better flushes that beat yours, which could cost you. This is what we call reverse implied odds, when completing your hand might actually lead to a loss if someone else has something even better. Bottom line, while calling is generally your last option pre-flop, there are times when it's exactly the move you need to make. Just be sure you've got the pot and implied odds in your favor when you do. Ever wondered how smart defense can actually turn the tables in your favor? Stick around as we continue to explain the trick to level up the game. Tip 5. Defend your big blind. Now let's break it for you. When you're in the big blind, you've already got a big blind invested in the pot. Think of it as getting a discount when someone raises. This simply means whenever someone opens with a 3x raise, you don't really have to win every time to make your big blind defense worthwhile. You only need to win about 25% of the time against their opening range to make it profitable. And if someone makes a smaller raise, maybe just to try and snatch the blinds, you've got an even more valid reason to defend your big blind by calling with a wider range of hands. This could include a variety of cards like suited connectors, suited aces, and broadways. At this point, we'd love to know. Do you often defend your big blind aggressively, or do you tend to fold and wait for a better spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's discuss different strategies. You gotta also learn how to not leave money on the table by adjusting your strategy against passive players. That's what we're talking about next. Tip 4. Don't play passively against wide ranges. This is a more advanced tip, but valuable as you gain experience. Make light 3 bets, a re-raise pre-flop after an opponent's raise against weaker regular players. Honestly, it is amazing how much profit people leave behind pre-flop by simply not 3-betting enough. Talking by experience, this is either because they want to trap their opponent or they are insecure about playing post-flop in a 3-bet pot, which is perfectly understandable if you're just starting out. But you also need to understand that this is not how you should play poker once you get some experience under your belt. You will need to come to peace with the fact that in order to make real money playing poker, you will have to be aggressive. And yeah, over time, you will eventually learn to control fears and apply aggression only when you have to. It's all about having an aggressive approach, basically, not being a complete maniac. Firing up a 3-barrel bluff, for example, takes time to master, but with work and discipline, it will become second nature to you, and eventually, you will learn which poker player types you can do this against. As we decide to take the passive line versus a wide range instead of 3-betting, 2 things happen. First, flatting an open raise versus a wide range leaves a lot of value on the table because often they would have simply folded that, or they would have called and then folded to your flop C bet. Secondly, 3-betting prevents hands from developing into a multi-way disaster where you have no idea where you are versus a bunch of loose fish. Do you prefer a strategy with light 3-bets, or do you play more conservatively? Tell us about your style in the comment section below. It's not just about building strong strategies, it's also crucial to spot your opponent's weak points and use them in your favor. Coming up next, we'll show you how to turn their mistakes into your gains. Stay with us for some game-changing tips. Tip 3. Attack weakness. Your main profit at the poker table comes from less skilled players, often referred to as fish. At the micros, players often play according to the strength of their hands. So, whenever you see someone playing too passively, checking and calling, it is often because they have a weak hand, and they would just like to see the next card as cheaply as possible. That's exactly where you come in to attack. The same goes for someone who is playing way too many hands. Their overall hand strength is going to be weak because of this. Well, honestly, there aren't that many strong hands in poker out there anyway. You may expect playing with medium to weak hands and even complete garbage most of the time. This is why the best pre-flop poker strategy in the world is simply to fold pre-flop. Trust us when we say this. It is always smart to isolate these players. Tip 2. Don't decide the victory too soon. Most of the newbies will do this for sure, so let us get this straight. Don't get too excited or overconfident during the game about offsuit Broadway cards, which are the 10, Jack, Queen, King, and Ace. Yeah, it's tempting to think these cards are strong just because they're high, but you gotta remember their strength also depends on whether they're suited. Suited cards are generally more powerful because they can make the best hands in poker, like a royal flush or straight flush. On the other hand, even though offsuit Broadway cards might form strong combinations like a full house or four of a kind, they're still vulnerable. They can't make flushes, which puts you at a disadvantage against anyone holding suited cards that complete a straight flush or royal flush. Whenever you're dealt with Broadway cards that aren't suited, be careful not to overestimate their value. Let us know in the comments below if you've ever overplayed Broadway cards and learned this the hard way. No doubt, winning in poker isn't just about holding good cards, it's more about playing smart. Reserve all-in pre-flop bets for when you hold premium hands like pocket aces, kings, queens, or ace-king. This conserves your chips for when you have a significant mathematical edge. Widen your range slightly against extremely aggressive players, but remember, most good players today will not easily give up their chips. The final tip is something nobody usually talks about, so let's break the ice for you. Tip 1. Remain patient and disciplined. If we had to give one single piece of advice to those who are starting to play poker, it would be to develop patience and discipline, something you are going to need if you want to win consistently at the micros. We know this is something that is really hard to do for some people who are starting out, but this is going to help your game a lot when you are moving up in stakes. Hike a mountain, meditate, and do whatever you have to do in order to develop your mental discipline in this game. Because to be quite honest, discipline truly is the core of all winning poker. We know that nobody is interested to hear this because it isn't all sexy or fun or exciting, but it is the truth. And we really can't stress enough on how important this is. It's very easy to lose your focus and concentration when you have been through the grind of non-stop hours of practice and learning. This is often when you begin to deviate from your core strategy and begin to make dumb mistakes. For example, playing more hands out of position and calling raises a lot lighter than normal. And this is also when your bankroll and your win rate also begins to plummet because you are playing badly and not sticking to the game plan. Staying at the top of your A game at all times, even after a 10-hour session, is a skill that is hard to develop, but it is one of the most important things that you need to learn in this game. We believe that taking care of yourself mentally when you're away from the tables is extremely important and does wonders. To be a winning poker player these days, it takes a lot more than knowing which hands to play in which position. This means knowing when to be aggressive, when to assess your odds realistically, and when it's wise to fold to avoid throwing good money after bad. Remember, successful poker is not just about playing the right cards, but playing them at the right time and against the right opponents. What strategies do you use to step up your poker sessions? Any tips for newcomers? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments section below. We'll be reading along. That being said, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more helpful tips and insights about the game of poker. Stay tuned for more expert tips and updates coming your way as we help you master the game in no time. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with another video real soon.